Here is something most gardeners discover by accident, usually in their third or fourth year of growing perennials, when they walk out one spring morning and notice plants in places they never put them. Small rosettes of coneflower pushing up through the gravel path, clusters of black-eyed Susan appearing along the edge of the bed where only lawn was last year, a drift of foxglove threading through the shrubbery, seeding itself into the gap between the rhododendron and the fence. Most gardeners see this and do not know what to think. They did not plant these. They might even try to remove them, thinking they are weeds. And then they look more carefully and realize what they have. Free plants. Plants that chose their own location, that found the conditions they needed, that established themselves without any human help, and that are already showing every sign of thriving exactly where they landed. That is self-seeding, and it is the most underrated quality in all of perennial gardening. The ability of a plant to reproduce itself from seed, to scatter those seeds into the surrounding garden, and to fill in the spaces around it with the next generation, is something that commercial plant breeding has been quietly reducing for decades in favor of more predictable, more containable, more saleable varieties. But the plants that still do it, the ones that haven't been selected away from this quality, create a kind of garden that you cannot buy in any nursery. A garden that is alive in the fullest sense, always shifting slightly, always finding new spaces, always doing the quiet biological work of filling in and expanding and becoming something richer and more layered with every passing season. Today I am going to walk you through the best self-seeding perennials available to American gardeners, explain exactly how each one seeds itself and what to expect from that process, and give you the information you need to manage self-seeding as a feature rather than a problem. Because the difference between a self-seeding garden that looks designed and one that looks like it got away from you is entirely a function of which plants you choose, how you manage the ones you want, and how you identify and remove the ones you do not want before they establish. Let us start with the plant that does this better than almost any other, and whose seeds are doing their work in gardens across America right now. Coneflower, Echinacea purpurea. Plant 3 in spring and give them 4 years. By year 4, if you have been leaving the seed head standing through winter as you should, you will have the beginnings of a naturalized planting that covers several times the area you originally planted. Coneflower seeds in 2 ways simultaneously. The raised dome seed heads, those architectural structures that remain standing through fall and winter and feed goldfinches and chickadees from October through February, drop seeds into the surrounding soil as they are worked by birds, and as they simply loosen with wind and freeze-thaw cycling. Those seeds germinate in spring, producing small rosettes that are identifiable early in the season if you know what to look for. They have a distinctive, rough-textured, slightly hairy leaf surface that sets them apart from most weeds. Hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9. Full sun to light shade, average to poor soil. The self-seeding is more prolific in slightly disturbed soil, meaning the gaps between established plants, along the edges of mulched beds, and at the transition between bed and path. Coneflower does not seed itself aggressively into areas covered by dense ground cover or thick turf. It finds the spaces between things and fills them. That is a design quality, not a nuisance. A well-managed coneflower planting that has been self-seeding for 3 or 4 years looks like something a landscape architect spent considerable money creating, because it has achieved the naturalized drift quality that no amount of deliberate planting quite replicates. The management of coneflower self-seeding is simple. Leave seed heads through winter for the bird value and the free seeds. In spring, identify the seedlings early. They appear as small rough rosettes close to the ground, and thin them by hand to the spacing and location you want. Transplant unwanted seedlings to new areas rather than discarding them. Each seedling is a free plant worth several dollars at any nursery. Black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia fulgida goldsturm, seeds itself with a reliability and generosity that makes it one of the best value plants in American perennial gardening. The golden yellow flowers with deep chocolate centers bloom from July through October. When those flowers go to seed in fall, each flower head holds dozens of seeds that are distributed by wind, by birds working the seed heads, and by the simple mechanical action of rain and wind shaking the dried stems. A 3-year-old black-eyed Susan planting that has been allowed to self-seed creates a colony effect that is one of the most beautiful natural-looking combinations available. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. Full sun, average to poor soil with good drainage. The self-seeding is dependable, but not aggressive. Black-eyed Susan does not escape into lawn or compete successfully with established dense plants. It seeds into open, slightly disturbed ground, which in a garden context means the spaces you actually want it to fill. Leave the seed heads standing through winter. Not just for the aesthetic and the bird value, though both are real. Leave them because those are next season's plants standing right there, waiting for the right moment to let go. Columbine, Aquilegia, is the self-seeder that makes the most visually complex and interesting contribution to a garden over time, because of what happens to the genetics. Columbine cross-pollinates freely between varieties, and the seeds it drops produce offspring that are genetic combinations of every columbine within pollinator range. If you plant a purple Aquilegia and a yellow Aquilegia in the same garden, within 3 seasons you will have self-seeded offspring in purple-yellow bicolor combinations you did not plant, and entirely new color forms that emerge from the genetic crossing. The garden starts producing colors you never ordered. This is one of the more delightful phenomena in all of perennial gardening, the plant creating novelty through its own reproductive biology. Hardy, in zones 3 through 8, partial shade to full sun depending on variety, rich, well-draining soil with consistent moisture. Columbine is somewhat short-lived as an individual plant, typically performing well for 2 to 4 years before declining. The self-seeding population that surrounds it, however, is continuously refreshed, meaning the planting as a whole is permanent, even if individual plants cycle through. This is the important distinction between Columbine as a plant and Columbine as a garden system. Individual plants are temporary. The self-seeding population is long-term. The genetic crossing phenomenon in Columbine has been documented by seed savers who deliberately grow multiple varieties in close proximity and collect the offspring seeds over several seasons. The color forms that emerge after 3 or 4 generations of cross-pollinated self-seeding in a mixed garden often include colors that do not exist in any commercial seed catalog, because they represent unique genetic combinations that have never been selected and named. Gardeners who have maintained mixed columbine plantings for a decade or more often describe having flowers they could not find for sale anywhere, produced by the garden itself through decades of unmanaged but productive genetic recombination. This is the most direct form of participatory plant breeding available to any home gardener, and it requires nothing beyond planting multiple varieties and leaving the seed heads alone. Do not deadhead columbine if you want it to self-seed. Do not deadhead columbine if you want it to self-seed. The instinct to remove spent flowers is counterproductive with this plant. Let the seed pods develop and dry on the plant. When they are fully mature, they will begin to split and release tiny black seeds. This is the moment to either let them fall naturally into the surrounding garden or to collect them deliberately for placement in specific locations. Foxglove digitalis purpurea is technically a biennial rather than a true perennial, meaning the individual plants live for 2 years, producing a leaf rosette in the first year and the tall, dramatic flower spike in the second. But the self-seeding habit of foxglove is so prolific and so reliable that a foxglove planting, once established from a first planting, effectively becomes permanent. There are always first-year rosettes alongside second-year flowering plants, meaning bloom is continuous from the established colony even though no individual plant blooms more than once. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. Partial shade with consistent moisture. The tall spikes of tubular bells in deep pink, white, cream, and purple with spotted interiors are among the most dramatic and immediately recognizable flowers in the garden world, and they attract hummingbirds specifically. The tubular flower shape is biologically tuned for hummingbird feeding in a way that makes foxglove one of the most reliable hummingbird attractors available to American gardeners in the zones where it grows. Safety note: all parts of foxglove contain cardiac glycosides that are genuinely toxic if consumed. This has been known and respected by gardeners for centuries. Foxglove grown as an ornamental plant presents no risk to adults who are not consuming plant material, but it should be planted with awareness in gardens used by young children or where animals might have access to significant quantities of plant material. Verbena bonariensis, tall verbena, earns its place on this list by doing something no other self-seeder in the temperate garden does quite as effectively. It threads itself through other plants. Verbena bonariensis grows to 4 feet on airy, almost invisible branching stems, and the tiny clusters of vivid purple flowers it carries at the ends of those stems appear to float in the air above the surrounding plants at the same level. Self-seeded verbena does not appear in front of things or beside things. It appears among them, between them, rising through the gaps in the planting with a quality of weightless presence that creates the kind of layered, naturalistic depth that is the hallmark of the best-designed perennial plantings. Hardy in zones 7 through 11 as a perennial, but self-seeding so reliably in zones 5 and 6 that it effectively functions as a permanent garden presence in those zones as well, with the self-seeded offspring providing continuity, even when the parent plants do not survive winter, full sun, well-draining, lean soil. It self-seeds most prolifically at the bases of existing plants and along the edges between planting areas, exactly the spots where the floating vertical presence of verbena reads most beautifully against the surrounding planting. One additional quality of Verbena bonariensis that makes it particularly valuable in the self-seeding garden is the relationship between its self-seeded placement and the naturalistic design aesthetic it creates. When verbena seeds itself into the gaps between established perennials, it creates the kind of vertical layering that professional landscape designers specifically try to achieve with deliberate plant placement. The difference is that deliberately placed vertical plants look placed. Self-seeded verbena looks as though the garden designed itself, which is, in the most literal sense, exactly what happened. The visual effect of tall, airy purple flowers threading through a planting at 4 feet above the ground, seen against a background of lower mounding perennials, is one of the most sophisticated and most sought-after qualities in contemporary naturalistic garden design, and it comes entirely for free from a plant that asks for essentially nothing beyond the initial planting. Feverfew, Tanacetum parthenium, is one of the more charming self-seeders. Feverfew, Tanacetum parthenium, is one of the more charming self-seeders because of the combination of its delicate appearance and its extraordinary vigor. Small white daisy-like flowers with yellow centers cover the plant from June through August, and each plant produces an almost staggering quantity of seed. A single established feverfew plant can produce thousands of seeds per season, and a significant percentage of those seeds germinate reliably the following spring. This sounds alarming, but in practice the seedlings are easy to identify, easy to pull, and easy to transplant, which means feverfew gives you a very large number of plants to work with each spring, located wherever conditions suited them, and the editing process of keeping what you want and moving or removing what you do not want takes perhaps 30 minutes per season. Hardy in zones 4 through 9, full sun to partial shade, average soil. The herbal tradition around feverfew is long and documented. It has been used in European folk medicine traditions for headache treatment, and while making medical claims about any plant falls outside what I want to do here, the historical context of feverfew as a garden plant is part of what makes it interesting. It is one of those plants that has been in human gardens for so long that its presence there feels almost inevitable. Verbascum, mulline, is the self-seeder for gardeners who want architectural drama from a plant that asks essentially nothing. The first-year rosette of large, woolly, silver-gray leaves creates a striking ground-level presence. In the second year, a flower spike rises to 6 feet or more, covered with small yellow or white flowers from early through midsummer. The seed heads that follow the flowers are themselves architectural, and those seeds disperse into every open patch of ground in the vicinity, producing new rosettes that add to the visual drama of a border, without asking for any management beyond removing the ones in locations that genuinely do not work. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, full sun, poor, dry, well-draining soil where it thrives with virtually no attention. This is one of the few self-seeders that actually performs better in lean, neglected conditions than in rich amended soil, which makes it invaluable for the difficult dry spots in a garden where other plants struggle to establish. Poppy, Papaver somniferum, the ornamental or breadseed poppy, is the self-seeder that produces perhaps the most concentrated visual impact per unit of garden space. The flowers are large, tissue paper textured, and available in every color from pure white through soft pink and salmon to deep burgundy and near black purple, often with fringed or double petals. They bloom in late spring and early summer, and the blue-green seed pods that follow the flowers are themselves beautiful in the garden and in cut flower arrangements. The self-seeding of poppy is reliable to the point of being nearly effortless. Scatter seed from an established plant across open ground in fall, or allow the naturally splitting seed pods to shed their contents directly into the garden, and the following spring you will have poppies wherever the seeds landed and found bare soil. This is technically an annual in most American gardens, reseeding so reliably that it functions as a permanent garden presence. The key is never to disturb the soil in the areas where you want poppies to establish after the seed has been shed, because the seeds need surface contact with soil and will not germinate if buried. Alchemilla mollis, lady's mantle, is the self-seeder for the edge of a shaded border or woodland garden path. It produces low mounds of pleated, softly hairy leaves that catch and hold water droplets in a way that is genuinely beautiful in morning light, each droplet sitting perfectly on the leaf surface. The frothy chartreuse yellow flowers in early summer are both charming in the garden and valuable as cut flowers, and after those flowers set seed, the plant distributes seedlings along paths, at the bases of walls, in the cracks of stone steps, and in any other location where open ground exists at moderate moisture levels, hardy in zones 3 through 8. Partial shade to full shade with consistent moisture. Lady's mantle is one of the few self-seeders that works effectively in shade and in the kind of moist, partially shaded border that so many gardens have, and that so few plants fill with genuine style. Sweet William, Dianthus barbatus, is a biennial or short-lived perennial that self-seeds with enough reliability to maintain a permanent planting once established. The dense, flat-topped clusters of richly fragrant flowers in deep pink, red, white, and bicolor combinations from May through July are immediately recognizable and consistently beloved. The fragrance is one of the richest in the garden, spicy sweet in the way that almost no modern annual manages to replicate. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, full sun, well-draining, slightly alkaline soil. Allow the seed heads to fully mature and shatter on the plant rather than deadheading, and seedlings will appear reliably in the surrounding area the following spring. Rudbeckia hirta, black-eyed Susan, the annual or short-lived perennial species as opposed to the reliable perennial goldsturm cultivar, self-seeds with particular reliability in disturbed ground, along path edges, and in the transition zones between lawn and garden bed. The visual effect it creates when self-seeded through a naturalistic planting is one of the most American and most evocative in gardening, the kind of late summer wildflower abundance that calls to mind roadsides and meadows and open spaces in the best possible way. Now, managing all of this effectively comes down to 3 specific practices. The first is learning to identify your self-seeded seedlings early, in spring, when they are still small and removable. Every plant on this list produces identifiable seedlings with specific leaf textures, shapes, or colors that set them apart from common weeds. The second is practicing the edit rather than the elimination. When you find a self-seeded plant in the wrong location, do not automatically pull it. Consider whether it could be transplanted to a better location. The third is leaving seed heads standing through winter rather than cutting plants down in fall cleanup. This is the single most important management decision in the self-seeding garden, because the seed heads you cut down in October are the plants you do not have in June. A fourth management practice worth adding to the 3 already mentioned is the practice of deliberate relocation during division season. Every spring, when you are assessing which self-seeded plants to keep and which to remove, consider the overall composition of the bed or border rather than individual plant placement. A self-seeded coneflower that appeared at the front of a border where it will eventually reach 3 feet can be moved to the back while it is still a small rosette. A verbena that's seeded into a spot where its height will block a shorter plant can be relocated to where that height is an asset. The self-seeding garden does most of the planting for you, but it does not understand your compositional intentions. The editing and relocating process is the collaboration between the garden's biological logic and the gardener's design sense. Both are necessary. The garden brings the plants, you arrange them. The self-seeding garden is not a garden that has gotten out of control. The self-seeding garden is not a garden that has gotten out of control. It is a garden that has started participating in its own design. The difference between chaos and naturalism in a garden is almost entirely a function of how much of the self-seeding you keep and how much you edit. Keep too much and the garden looks overwhelmed. Edit too aggressively and you lose the quality that makes the self-seeding garden genuinely special. That specific sense that the garden is alive, choosing, making decisions about its own composition in ways that no human planner could entirely anticipate or replicate. The garden that seeds itself is working for you even when you are not there. And that, for most gardeners, is one of the most satisfying truths in all of growing things. Drop a comment telling me which self-seeding plant has produced the most surprising result in your garden, and what state or USDA zone you are gardening in. I read every comment. Give this a thumbs up if it changed how you think about the plants reproducing themselves in your garden, and subscribe for plant science and gardening content every week.